Afternoon and evening to you all, and welcome to the second and last Together for Safety talk in 2022. My name is Jeppe Albers, and I'm the Executive Director of the Nordic Safe Cities Alliance, and I'm joining you here from Copenhagen in Denmark. Nordic Safe Cities is a city network, a regional alliance of cities in Scandinavia and Northern Europe, founded in 2015 after terror attacks in Copenhagen. And we spend our time uniting political leaders, city professionals, law enforcement, youth, civil society, and innovative thinkers in the region to work together on safety and inclusion to prevent extremism and hate. This is the second year that we are co-hosting the Together for Safety talks with the Strong Cities Network. Our two city networks have benefited from a strong partnership for a long time now, and we have decided to reinforce our collaboration by again hosting this series of online talks with speakers from around the world to inspire and support you out there listening today, national, local leaders, professionals, youth, working with different perspectives and new ideas on how we can push back polarization and hate and strengthen local democracies and social cohesion in the cities and communities where you live. At the previous Together for Safety talk 3 weeks ago, where some of you might have attended, we focused on how we could safeguard local democracies by positively engaging citizens to take part in democratic conversations. And we also discussed how to safeguard elections and counter foreign election interference and online misinformation. Today, we will focus on safe city governance, the role of networks and alliances. We will examine what cities and regions can do to inspire each other and ensure horizontal sharing of knowledge and approaches to extremism prevention. This will take its form over the 3 following sessions in today's webinar, where we'll look at different levels, national, regional, and local alliances, with a particular focus on building local resilience and social cohesion with civil society. Here from Copenhagen and Nordic Safe Cities, we're especially proud to welcome our Nordic partners into the conversation today, including our core partner in Norway, the Gjensidige Foundation, and their director, Ingrid Laurent, who will later today share some of the models and some of the work we're doing together on alliance building against extremism in Norway. For you listening today and taking part in the conversation, it's possible to ask questions by using the Q&A function throughout the chat, and please do write your thoughts, contributions, comments, ideas into the chat throughout the sessions. They're very much welcome, and we will pick up on them afterwards if we don't have the time to reply today. I would also like to draw your attention to the fact that this event is being recorded and Chatham House rules do not apply. And now, with further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our first moderator, who many of you know. It is Daniel Huden, who is head of international programs at the Strong Cities Network. Dan is responsible for a lot of events and activities, and has been for a while, and responsible for strategy and delivery of international programs at ISD and Strong Cities Network. This includes, at the moment, projects to develop institutional approaches to long-term governance, human security, social policy, challenges in cities across Africa, Asia, the Balkans, and the Middle East. Dan, I pass over the baton to you for the first session.
Jeppe, thanks so much, and it's a pleasure to be with everybody today, and thank you for joining this, as Jeppe said, the second in this year's series of collaborative webinars between the Strong Cities Network and the Nordic Safe Cities. It's been a real opportunity over the past 2 years having these webinars to look at perspectives that obviously focus on the Nordic region, but look then also at comparing that experience around the world with the global membership and partners of the Strong Cities Network. We've covered a lot of ground. It was fantastic to have the most recent webinar focusing on safeguarding local democracy and the sort of threats to democratic institutions and principles from what we're now seeing is really a hybrid set of threats at the local level. So today's webinar takes that a step further, and we look really at the role of networks. We will, throughout today's webinar, hear from those involved in networks of cities and towns and regions. We'll also look at nationwide networks, at practitioner networks, a number of different collaborative bodies that are working on pooling experience and lessons and learning on preventing violent extremism in different contexts. I'm pleased that we will look at a number of different global contexts, and our first session will look in particular at an example from the global north in Germany and an example from the global south in Kenya. I'm very pleased that we have two distinguished speakers joining us for this panel. We have Mikewa Ogada and Mark Elksnat joining us. And so I will ask each of them to speak and explain a little bit about the work of their networks and some of the learnings that comes from the work that they've done in Kenya and Germany, respectively. We'll then have a little bit of a discussion around some of the really important takeaways from those networks and what we can really take forward for the rest of the discussion. There'll be an opportunity to ask some questions, so please do use the chat and Q&A functions at the bottom of your screen to post questions. Panelists can respond there in text, or we can put questions to them at the end of their presentations. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our first speaker today on this session. Mikewa Ogada is an independent researcher and M&E consultant from Kenya. He's got 20 years or more of experience in the fields of violence prevention, including preventing and countering violent extremism, policing, human rights, and access to justice issues. Mikewa is going to talk to us a little bit about the lessons from Kenya's Peace, Security, and Development Network. And it'd be fascinating to hear his perspective. So Mikewa, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you and greetings to you all. As you've heard, I'm Mikewa Ogada, a security and justice consultant based in Nairobi, and I want to talk about some of the lessons that we learned over time about the work of the PSD network. I believe that the lessons learned from the work of this now defunct network are relevant and are valuable to practitioners around the world seeking to understand more about the value of networks and the partnerships that partnerships can have in addressing and preventing extremism. I was privileged to provide technical assistance in organizational development for an 8-year period with this important network of 5 NGOs working on peace, security, and justice issues in Kenya's coastal region. During this time, my colleagues and I became intimately familiar with the network's activities and dynamics. In terms of strengths and achievements of this network, evidence we gathered during this period confirmed to us that the positive perceptions about the PSD network's effectiveness and impact in extremism prevention resulted from the willingness of its 5 partners to blend their diverse and sometimes conflicting mandates and approaches, which included human rights, peace building, interfaith dialogue, and youth economic empowerment activities. The PSD network partners were able to address the multidimensional issues of violent extremism, ethnic polarization, and resource-based conflicts affecting this part of Kenya because they were able to jointly design and utilize multi-pronged approaches that no single actor had the capacity to deploy on their own. Also, evidence we generated over time showed that networking helped broaden the geographic scope and sustainability of the network's interventions. In addition, the partnership between the PSD network members contributed to fostering the present-day solidarity and cohesion that we see between human rights activists, development workers, and religious actors who work on peace, security, and justice issues in coastal Kenya. We also found that local communities were able to share critical intelligence and information with specific network partners that they felt most at ease with. In some cases, it was religious leaders, while in others, it might be human rights or peace workers. Whatever the case, the wonderful thing is that all this intelligence and information was shared within one network of actors, and subsequent interventions were planned jointly. What we also thought was very smart from a security point of view was the inclusion of 2 highly respected and authoritative religious organizations amongst the 5 network partners. This, at least for some time, gave the PSD network considerable latitude to be publicly critical of the Kenya government's harsh counterterrorism measures without fear of significant reprisals. In terms of weaknesses and challenges associated with the network, a major weakness and challenge we found over time with the networking approach to extremism prevention was that the more the actors, the more time it took to make decisions and build consensus on the form interventions would take. In addition, the impact of what would have otherwise been straightforward interventions would sometimes be diluted when each partner's contribution and participation had to be taken into account. We repeatedly witnessed arguments amongst network leaders over how to plan, prioritize, and sequence the use of different interventions. For example, in some cases, religiously inclined network partners believed and argued that other partners' advocacy for human rights accountability complicated or impeded peace work, and vice versa. This would happen despite the fact that we worked with them over several weeks to negotiate and establish a memorandum of understanding to guide their networking and partnership. Regrettably also, the PSD Network partners were almost entirely donor-funded and therefore in large measure not self-driven. The sustainability of the network and its impacts have suffered as a result. Turning to potential benefits that horizontal knowledge sharing on prevention approaches may have for cities and actors, we do have some important examples of communities of practice effectively documenting and sharing evidence on extremism prevention and violence prevention generally in Kenya. However, the capacities of many actors can still be shored up to enable them to better inform policy, law, and administrative practices related to extremism prevention at both the national and subnational levels. Looking ahead, I believe that routinizing and adequately financing such horizontal information sharing processes in the Kenyan context, and I believe in other contexts, will continue to be challenging and is an area requiring significant planning and investment. I would therefore recommend that actors such as the Strong Cities Network continue to upscale support to these communities of practice so that they can shore up their capacities to generate, document, and share quality evidence on practices and interventions for extremism prevention. In closing, I feel strongly that there's an urgent need for our development partners to support researchers and practitioners in the Global South to lead the way in documenting and telling the stories of networks like the PSD Network. There's in fact many different kinds of local capacity around Kenya and in other developing contexts for this storytelling. This local capacity should be encouraged and facilitated. Thank you for listening to me.
Okay, well, thank you so much for a really concise and to the point presentation. And I think you've given us a lot of food for thought. It's really interesting actually to start with a network that, as you say, is now defunct, but where there are a number of learnings that can be taken forward and used not just in the Kenyan context, but actually have some lessons related to how we make this cooperation most effective and sustainable. But you pointed to a number of issues, so thank you so much for that contribution. We're going to come back to Mikewa's presentation and some of the points he raised in the discussion afterwards. But for now, I'd like to welcome our next speaker, and we're going to turn our attention away from Kenya for a moment and over to Germany. Mark, fantastic to have you with us, and thank you so much for joining us. Mark Elksnat is head of unit at the German Association for Cities and Municipalities since 2016. He works for the cybersecurity unit, and he's currently responsible for the areas of general constitutional questions, security, public health, and migration and integration. Mark, I think there are a number of lessons that we can learn from what is, I think, a very active network. And I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. The floor is yours. Thanks.
Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, we actually did in the last year a big project with our Federal Ministry of Interior to explore different kinds of deradicalization projects in Germany. We have around 11,000 municipalities, so it was, and we have a lot. We learned that there are a lot of different projects that are really good. So from this project and from this really good project, we have some takeaways I want to share to say how we want or what's the take on building a network in general, and what you have to do and what you should do from our perspective. So first of all, it seems easy, but analyze the situation on the ground. Consider your local problems and the needs with regard to extremist phenomena, and discuss them with people, offices, clubs, societies, civil society, and all the actors you have in your local municipality or in your region. Take into account that the different perspectives of participants, and consider different dimensions that can play a role on the ground. For example, are there specific possible frequent radicalization processes? Do these occur in a specific type of extremism, such as Islamism or right-wing extremism, left-wing extremism? So you have to tackle a special issue, or do we have to tackle a lot of or many issues, which is quite more complicated actually, like you may imagine. Are there actually organized extremist groups, or are there individuals active on the ground? There are the key points before you actually start building your network. Analyze the situation. it's really important for the success of your network and of the de-radicalization process as we experienced. Second of all, after you analyze it, explore which competencies and expertise potential target groups need. So, for example, you have a youth group who radicalizes over the internet. They have different needs than, for example, elderly people who are extremism, or you have migrants that are radicalized. So you just have to have the best approach for your local problem. That's a big takeaway. Third point is clarify your mandate and the interests of the stakeholders involved. I think that's what Mikabe already told. You need to, or he addressed it. You need to consider the involvement of various stakeholders in the field of extremism and their respective interests. This may result in different specific orders to approach for you. For example, a security agency might have a different approach than, for example, a civil organization whose focus is on education. So you have different actors in your stakeholder and or in your network. You have to bring them together and organize them and keep your goals in order. It's a big problem, but you can actually, everybody can benefit from the exchange on the different goals. You have to clarify it in advance, your actually work and your groundwork. You also need to clarify what offers and resources are available. Like many municipalities and cities say, money is always tight. So clarify what resources you could use, what resources you can require from other organizations, like from the regional or the national level. You need to be in a constant exchange with the different levels, also with private actors like ISD or for example, or some other actors that focus on extremism prevention, to also acquire additional resources, even in building the network. First of all, after you plan it and you are in your network, you need to talk about implementation. So first of all, it's important to invest in confidence building measures. Like what does it mean? Task descriptions and agreements contribute significantly to the security of action of the persons involved. You need to build trust within your network, but also with the people out of your network. What are you doing? Why are you doing? Be transparent, be truthful, and also tell what is the problem, why you see the problem, and take advantage of the civil society in your local municipality. I think my time runs up, but I just will share one more point, which I think it's really important. You need to stay flexible during your program and during your network and de-radicalization process. You need to expect changes and deviations. Good planning is important, but you can't predict everything. Depending on current events on site, you may have to discover a new target group after the start of measures, for example, or completely or partially adapt, further develop, or realign the approach to your target group. So communicate necessary changes transparently to the actors involved, bind if necessary, bind in additional actors, and try to get additional funding, actually, if it's necessary, to adapt your network. Your network is a living project. It's not a static project. It's a living project with a goal to benefit for everybody. I think I will close with that, and I hope for a good discussion.
Mark, thank you so much for that. And it's a really, really important perspective from, I think, quite a long-standing network. And as you say, with some 11,000 municipalities engaged. So I imagine that throws up an enormous set of challenges, some of which you've alluded to. But it's actually been really interesting through both of your contributions. With Mikewa, I can see his M&E specialism coming to the fore in some of the summary that he's given us. And I think, Mark, also you've given us a really solid analysis there. I wonder if I can just take a step back as we look at this and just set the scene for those that are listening who are not necessarily familiar with either of these networks. And Mikewa, perhaps first of all, you can just explain who some of the partners are that were involved in this network, what their different mandates were, and then I'll turn to Mark to do the same. I think that poses some interesting questions.
Yeah, very quickly, there were 5 civil society partners in this network. So it was entirely, exclusively civil society. We had Muslims for Human Rights, that's Muhuri's, quite a well-known NGO in Kenya and the region. We had Kenya Muslims Youth Alliance. I think it's quite self-explanatory from the name. We had Council of Imams and Preachers of Kenya, that's Islamic clerical organization. Then we also had Coast Interfaith Council of Clerics, which was an interfaith dialogue sort of organization that brought Christian and Islamic and other types of religious organizations together into one body to foster interfaith dialogue and understanding. And finally, we had KECOSKE, that is Kenya Education Support Community Support Group, which is an NGO that deals with outreach issues and outreach on violence prevention in particular.
So I mean, obviously,
and they were completely funded by Danida. So this project was completely funded by Danida for an 8-year period, and when that ended, unfortunately, it fell apart. But the organizations are still active, but not as the PSD network.
I see. Mikewa, it's interesting because a number of them share similar mandates, but you alluded to, trying to understand exactly where some of the conflicting areas were. And as Mark was just talking about, really clarifying the mandates between these different partners is a really important lesson. And I think it poses the question of sort of leadership and coordination, which I want to explore with both of these networks. But Mark, before we do that, perhaps just explain something to those who are tuning into this around the kinds of stakeholders who are involved. And you talk about 11,000 municipalities. Do we assume, therefore, that that's municipalities and towns of all sizes across Germany? And who from those municipalities is really the person, the stakeholder engaged with the network?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. Most of all, or as we there are different networks in the municipalities, so we don't have one big network. That's to clarify. But as we experienced it, it's important for local network that the mayor or the head of the local government is actually leading by example in the network. If the municipality started or the city or region started, and you have to involve, like Mikewa said, teachers or the education branch. It's really important to involve education branch. It's really important actually to, as we experienced it, to involve security branches and the civil actors, like the local clubs, and also churches and religious communities. They take in some or in parts of religious fundamentalism and extremism. It's really important to have the churches and the religious communities on your side and try to get them involved in prevention. That's a really big part as we experienced it, and you have to coordinate continuously and get the right approach. That's what I can share in this point. There are a lot of projects, like for example, if you go to Wolfsburg, a city in northern Germany, they involved also some sports clubs, etc., just to get the youth, more young people involved in in prevention and to foster this issue of preventing radicalization.
Mark, thank you. I think that's really helpful, and thanks for some of the clarifications there. And it's really good, I think, to understand a little bit more about specifically the different partners that you've involved. On the question then of leadership and coordination, because Mikaela, one quote from your presentation that stuck out: the more actors you have, the more time it took to make decisions. One added sort of complication to that, as you say, was that you were dependent upon, this network was dependent upon donor support from Danida for 8 years. How did these organizations that came together in this network make decisions effectively, is my first question. And what kind of institutional framework was necessary in order to make those decisions effective? And the second part of the question is, how did they make decisions that were genuinely driven by these organizations and by the situation they saw on the ground? As Mark said, his first lesson was analyze the situation on the ground and diagnose the issues you've got to deal with, despite working to a donor framework. So how did they maintain really some leadership and some degree of autonomy within that network, despite obviously delivering to a donor framework and a grant program?
In terms of leadership of the network, it was initially very strained when we started working with them in 2009. So one of the ideas that came up that we pursued was to develop a memorandum of understanding that would create a clear framework. And this took time to negotiate, and slowly and gradually they started working through this. But like with many African contexts, the people that took the lead, I guess, were the most respected and the most senior. And this happened to be, in many cases, the senior clerics, especially from the Coast Interfaith Council of Clerics. People would defer to them. The human rights actors and the rest would tend to defer to them. But we had also a rotational kind of approach in the network memorandum that gave the chair of the network to different people. I think it was every 6 months there was a rotation. In terms of the institutional framework for delivering activities jointly, the donor was very clever in terms of not only funding, having funding for the individual organizations, but there was also a specific basket fund for joint activities, so that they planned activities together and then drew from this fund, so that nobody felt strained or felt that our budget is being exhausted for an activity or a strategy or an approach that we don't necessarily fully support. And then there was one other question, I think, that you asked about autonomy. This was tricky, and this continued to dog the network up to the bitter end. The government would always tell them, this is a European agenda, that the NIDA is funding this. Where's your autonomy on this? And mark you, this was happening, this network was rolling out its activities in a very challenging context where you want to have partnership with the government, but this is the very same government that is committing grave human rights violations in the context of its counterterrorism operations. This is a government that is historically has seen civil society as mere crime spotters and informers and not really partners in security work. So it was very, very tricky.
Thanks for that, Mikaela. I think some really, really helpful insights. And I think from the Strong Cities work that we've done with partners in Kenya, certainly can see some of the issues that you speak to. We only have a couple of minutes before we move on to the next session, but before we do that, Mark, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, what's been the impact of COVID to the network? And are networks more useful or networks less useful in the now that we are in the COVID era? I don't say post-COVID
era. First of all, I have to say that networks had to adapt to the new situation. First of all, it's not as easy to have prevention work or to have prevention work when you're in a lockdown, but it's easy for people to radicalize. So we had to develop, or the networks had to develop new strategies to reach out to the people. Then to answer your question, it's really more important, and it probably for Germany at least, if you're seeing some of the discussions and protests in part of Germany against COVID measures, for example, and radicalization, prevention is really important, and the role of the networks is more important than ever, and it's really there's a real need to get more funding into networks and to support their work from a state level, but also from a national level.
Mark, thank you, and I'd certainly echo that. I think we are really seeing a resurgence of engagement with the Strong Cities Network and with other partners. I know that Nordic Safe Cities absolutely are seeing just ever more the importance of these networks, both on a regional and global level. And I think both of you in this conversation have really drawn out some important lessons, and it's been very useful to have your perspectives, and again from very different geographies. So thank you both very, very much for your contributions. I think just by way of summarizing this session, I think we've learned very much around the importance of achieving critical mass among different partners on a really sensitive topic area, where some of these partners, and we may be talking about small municipalities or civil society organizations, are not necessarily the first to the table in the existing way that governments and multilateral institutions tend to work on the issues of preventing and countering violent extremism. So working together, achieving that critical mass, and supporting the agenda and advocating for the role of these partners collectively, certainly the sort of first takeaway I take from both of these presentations. Second was a point made by both of you in different ways, really, but legitimacy, making sure that you can act legitimately and with the support of the community that you're trying to engage with. And that involves, Mark, as you helpfully set out, three really important first steps: analyzing the situation on the ground, exploring the specific competencies that are there or that are not there, and making sure that you're addressing the gaps that you have, and clarifying your mandate. And I think that speaks to another issue where networks have to, by their nature, work with a diversity of partners with different strengths, weaknesses, and focuses. But they also have to be clear on a common vision. And I think that is a really, really important challenge. And finally, I'd just say on the point of leadership, I think this is a really important one, especially where the sort of donor environment is involved, maintaining that autonomy, but really responding to the issues as they are on the ground, not the issues as they're perceived elsewhere. But really having the frameworks institutionally in place to facilitate collective leadership among, as we've talked about, very different partners, I think is a real challenge. And it's interesting to hear from both of these networks how you've done that. So Mikaela, Mark, thank you so much for those contributions. We're now going to move on to our second session of this webinar, and it's my pleasure to hand over to my colleague, Charlotte Moyens, Senior Manager with the Strong Cities Network. Charlotte, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dan, and thank you to our first panel for what I thought was an excellent way of kicking off this webinar. So as Dan said, I'm Charlotte. I'm a Senior Manager with the Strong Cities Network, and it is my pleasure to introduce you to today's second session, which is about overcoming local challenges and how networks can both serve as, but also be used to find innovative solutions to overcome those challenges and to otherwise fill gaps in response by connecting services and resources within localities, but also across and between locations. So before I pass to our first speaker, I just want to remind the audience that you can pose questions in the chat or using the Q&A function that Zoom provides, which you'll find in the bottom bar of your Zoom screen. So now I will pass on to our first speaker. We are switching up the agenda a little bit, and we'll hear first from Norway, from Ingrid Lorang, who is director of the NCD Foundation and who will share with us some of her and the foundation's experience with supporting the Safe City Norway network. Ingrid, over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation and the introduction. The NCD Foundation became a member of Nordic Safe Cities in January 2020 and now work with the network Safe City Norway. The NCD Foundation is the largest financial foundation in Norway, and our vision is to secure good lives in a safe society. So yes, it's a vision that can be shared by many. We will support relevant organizations and initiatives with approximately 27 million euro in 2022. This session's topic is related to how networks can find innovative solutions. And I'll quote the historic Norwegian writer Olav Duun, who said that the difficulty lies not in thinking out a new idea, but in doing so alone. And the more commonly known businessman Henry Ford said that coming together is beginning, keeping together is progress, and working together is success. So in short, in Gjensidig Institution, we believe that cooperation and networking not only help, but is a prerequisite to succeed with finding and implementing innovative and lasting solutions to major challenges in society. When we joined the network in 2020, the collaboration between Nordic safe cities and several Norwegian cities and municipalities had already existed for some time. However, much good work and knowledge sharing was also progressing already. But however, there was a challenge related to securing sufficient funding to not only maintain the network, but also to start, initiate, and run projects to test new ideas and solutions. So since the start of the collaboration and in excellent cooperation with the Secretariat of Nordic Safe Cities, we've strengthened the Norwegian network by supporting the member cities and municipalities and their partners in the civil sector, financially and professionally. We've so far allocated 3.5 million euro to that. And in addition to that, we've helped establish arenas and meeting places for professionals and volunteers to share experience, increase learning, and join forces. So an important task in the Safe City Network, Norway network, is to try out new concepts to create safety, building local resilience and social cohesion, as well as preventing violent extremism, polarization, and hate speech. The Norwegian network works closely together with different types of projects, from dealing with questions on how to increase the number of youth taking part in democratic processes, how debates online can be less polarized, how to reduce hate speech online, and how to build safe and welcoming arenas for all young people, but especially also youth at risk. The 10 municipalities and their collaborating non-profit organizations are looking for results and knowledge of what works and how concepts and models can scale up as well for other municipalities. So they've all kind of signed up and promised to share all their experience also with others and potentially new members of the network. So this is really all about a shared approach across institutions, volunteers, and professionals that recognize and appreciate the challenge of cause and effect when working on the toughest challenges. In recent years, we have in Norway, as I think also many other places, witnessed increased digital activity among extremist groups, and several reports suggest that extremism has become more and more digitally entrenched. The internet and social media have become a place where threats and hatred thrive. And at the same time, the digital and the physical have kind of merged in our everyday lives, and the Nordic intelligence services have all pointed out in their threat assessment that misinformation, extremism, and radicalization on the internet are one of the major areas of focus that must be prioritized in prevention. This development is problematic for municipalities and local security workers, as it's still difficult to form an accurate picture of how a hatred, extremism, and racism travel online and spread in a geographical area such as a city. Even less is the knowledge of how local actors can work preventively and concretely against these digital patterns and expressions of hatred. So meeting these challenges requires a systematic understanding of why, where, and how the local hate speech is formed and spread, to avoid acting randomly or too late when the hatred has already taken root in the physical environment as well. So therefore, through the Safe Cities Norway, we've started a project called Safe Digital City to strengthen the digital prevention work locally. The work builds on network experience from other Nordic cities, but is the first of its kind in Norway. The collaboration means that a selected group of cities will have the opportunity to map the public conversation online locally in each city, and at the same time prepare a national analysis and mapping of hateful conversation on publicly available social media in Norway. So that can be used also by many and newly joining members of the network. So all in all, I hope this gives some perspectives on how we in the Insidia Foundation see that collaboration and networks prove to innovate and can make a difference towards creating good lives in a safe society. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much for that very insightful intervention. Lots of very important topics that you touched on, especially the last topic around integrating an understanding of the digital in that local approach, which we know through the Strong Cities Network has been a challenge really for local actors, how that we, in our programming and our policy, recognize the integration between the on and offline worlds and how that we then respond appropriately. So thank you for that, it's very interesting. We have a little bit of a change of agenda, so I'm now going to invite Jeppe from Nordic Safe Cities, who opened up the webinar, to join us for a Q&A session. Hi, Jeppe.
Hi, Charlotte.
So I guess I'll just start by posing a couple of questions that I have, and I'm just going to remind the audience as well, if you have any questions, obviously don't hesitate to put them in the chat or in the Q&A function. But I guess I'll start with with a national network like Safe Cities Norway's, what is the entry point into new locations? Like how do you like build a trust with a new location and service providers in a new location to then make sure that they're part of the network and part of that infrastructure that you're building?
Well, I can try to say a little bit about that now, and yes, on some of this, probably as much of the details as I do, but it's one thing that's really important, and that fascinates me a bit, because in the Insidia Foundation, we've seen that, well, it's not a surprise to anyone, but money talks. So the thing is that if you want someone to collaborate, and we truly believe that it's so important to bring different types of institutions across government, the civil sector, volunteer, all of these organizations together, so that you really can mobilize across all sectors, and through that strengthen and increase the chance of success on very difficult issues. And as it turns out, if you put money on the table and say that, if you cooperate, this is how we'll help you, then people tend to say, then, I want to be part of it. And it's simple, but it's important. And that's kind of also what we do in the network, right? We say that, if you see these challenges, and most of the municipalities do. So if you see them, and if you want a chance to get help and work with others to solve them, this is how we'll actually help you, and we'll fund parts of those initiatives. So I think it's fair to say, in honesty, that just putting the money on the table is a big catalyst for that type of cooperation, and also in getting others to onboard. But it's much about trust as well. So I think that what we need to show, and that's part of what we see in Norway as well, right? They want to see success. They want to believe in the initiatives that are there. So through the cooperation with Nordic Safe Cities, it's good that we can actually show that some of the things that we're working on have actually been partly tried elsewhere, and therefore, through showing the example, we will also motivate more people to join and actually put in the effort to make it work there as well. So I think both of those, just showing examples, providing the network, putting some of that money on the table, is an important part of getting more municipalities to actually join.
Great, thank you. I don't know, Jeppe, if you want to add anything, if I will jump straight to my next question.
Please do so. I think Ingrid's point were very much on point here.
And so you, Ingrid, in your presentation, you talked a little bit about this digital mapping and understanding the kind of digital landscape and how that plays out in different geographic contexts. Are there any other areas where you see where there is a need like that for innovation within addressing the threat at a local level?
I think what we see is that the different municipalities have started their work on addressing these social issues from very different perspectives, because they also have different challenges from the start. So the good thing here is that it's not so that you can say that all of them feel the same need for the same type of solution initially, because it's kind of started with different problems. But once they sit down together, they find that the experience from one place can really be transferred to another anyway, so that you actually create value. And so we see different kinds of tests, and I perceive it at least to be innovations, because also, I come from a technology world. I've worked in telecoms for many years previously, but just ideas such as introducing something like, we call it a democracy school for young people, creating mentorship solutions as well, where young people engage to help others that are as well at risk. We've had, I think I noted a couple more, that in one place also they've started education of what they call playmakers, which is kind of mentorships, etc., also to help people who used to have actually even been in situations where they've been in types of gangs, or I'm not sure what the right word is, but kind of gotten off the mark, to help them engage in a different way, and then make sure that that all of these different types try to support and engage in a better way, young people, especially in a democratic way in society. So I think all of these are different types of innovations. They come from different places, and it's really when people sit down, share the learnings, and can bring it on further, instead of saying kind of that there's one solution.
Yep. Anything to add, Jeppe?
Yeah, I concur, not surprisingly. I would say also, in addition, that the work on safeguarding local democracy or promoting democracy conversations among young people is a continuous conversation that's been taking place for many years in Norway, especially after the events 10 years ago with the attacks, and many of the municipalities are very good at it. But what is fantastic with the program that Gjensidige has initiated is that it creates a space both to reinforce and renew some of the ideas and thoughts around promoting democracy in new forms. And I think that's one of the key issues. It becomes increasingly difficult to do so, and the dilemmas are still there. But by creating a framework, a network where you can trust each other, that's one element, between the participants, where it's a closed room in a difficult space with a lot of difficult conversations, and you have the opportunity to move forward some of the difficult conversations. That's one element that you're providing, that kind of, not just the funding, but the room and the space for that kind of conversation in this topic between security, policing, civil society, difficult topics. That's one space, and I can see from the projects that the way this element is progressing in some of the smaller cities is due to your work, and also some of the other examples is, again, you can support some of the grander ideas in the city of Beum. You're funding an entire memorial center, a museum, you can see, for an event, in terms of, it's like a bigger program, school program also. That's also a way to support it. And I think, so it's both having I would say, the courage to push forward a delicate agenda, and creating a space where the network people can exchange ideas. Also, that is difficult, I would say, working with other foundations, to be in that space, and also provide, being courageous and wait for the results, and not push some kind of rigid formula down above local access, but giving them the time to progress their ideas. And then we had a pandemic for 3 years or 2 years also. But that kind of wait out, and combining it with, obviously, we and you would like results. Everyone in this space is talking about impact. But how do you create impact in the prevention world? This is a big conversation, but I think you have managed in the foundation also to work with an evaluation framework. That's very interesting. We can talk about that another time. But ensuring that you create results by giving trust to the local authorities and helping them create the innovation locally with a team of network supporting locally. That's one of the ideas there. With a new model of, you can say, impact creation. So being this kind of catalytic foundation, creating a trust in space and money, that's very rare. And I welcome everyone else to please do so. If you're a foundation to kind of lead, facilitate a societal agenda, and that's what I see on behalf of some of the cities that's really being pushed here.
Yeah, and just a comment, if I may as well. I think what we see is that, for the public sector, it's sometimes not necessarily so easy to start engaging also with the civil society, with organizations of volunteers, etc. It's kind of, the systems are are in general often a bit more sort of, this is the way we work, these are the roles we have. You don't want to differentiate between the different parties that you work with, and therefore also having someone sort of external, both with Nordic Safe Cities and as well with the role that the foundation can play. We can bring some of those also different types of institutions together in an environment where they normally elsewhere wouldn't meet. So that's also part of the mobilization that I think is really important, and that is enabled by these types of this way of working.
Yeah, great. I mean, you both touched on very important aspects of that networked approach, that networks can serve as a connective tissue between different layers of society, different stakeholders, build that foundation of trust that's then needed to deliver programming. And also the evaluation point is very important. That is an increasing demand, whether it's from existing donors, potential donors. There is more demand, rightfully so, for impact data to show, to have an evidence base for what works versus what doesn't. But it's still something that's lacking in the field. So there's the kind of vicious cycle of being asked for more impact data, but not necessarily having the capacity to provide that. And I guess a role that networks can play in that is to learn from each other, learn from different institutions, different sectors on evaluation approaches and how that can be brought together for a kind of broader look at the impact of the network as a whole. So Jeppe, you mentioned the pandemic. So I'm going to take that opportunity to ask a pandemic related question. What would you both say is the kind of greatest learning from the COVID era that we should use and kind of learn from and make sure that we implement in our programming going forward?
But it's kind of a difficult question, right? Because we don't want the pandemic back, of course. So there are several learnings, but there have also been several challenges introduced by the pandemic, because on one hand there has been lots of learning on using digital tools, which especially in a network where people sit in different parts of a country or even different parts of the world, it enables us to engage much more broadly and in a very efficient way, and we've become extremely much better at using these digital tools. So that's kind of the positive side, and I think the continuation of also using these tools to work that way is something that we should take care of. On the other hand, the fact that many people have been more isolated has also put more people into sort of a digital situation where hate speech kind of thrives. So that's a challenge. Another challenge is that many of the people that also work with this in the municipalities have also got their hands full with other tasks that have been more pressing. So because handling the pandemic and in small communities and municipalities, several of the people that have been engaged in this project have for periods of time during this needed to work with pandemic related issues instead. And we see some of the same thing happening now with the tragic situation that we have in Ukraine. So we need to be patient. We need to allow for some of these priorities to take place, and then just do our best in order to still continue to assist and maintain progress on some of these projects, but at least provide whatever help we can and be persistent and patient. I don't know if that's really the best answer, but at least it's a bit of the way the pandemic has affected the work that we're doing.
No, of course, very insightful. Jeppe, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Again, very much on point here with a lot of I think perspectives. Ingrid, from as a network leader perspective, I can also add the combination of being kind of understanding, being hybrid when you meet, when don't you meet, when you're digital, when you're not, and being both efficient, very efficient in terms of leading forward a conversation, but also knowing when do we need to talk and meet, and in order to change a conversation to create trust. I think there's been a new clarity around this in terms of creating an efficient network in terms of pace, trust, development, what is more managing activities, etc. So that's what we're trying to make use of in the Safe Cities Norway moving forward.
Great. Well, thank you both so much. That was very, very insightful and very helpful. I'm now going to introduce one of our other panelists, Brett Steele, who is Senior Director for Preventing Targeted Violence at the McCain Institute for International Leadership. I've had the pleasure of working closely with Brett and the McCain Institute on their Prevention Practitioners Network. So I know she's got great insight to share into the kind of development and importance of such a network in addressing some of the challenges we've talked about so far. Brett, over to you.
Yes, thank you for that, Shar. And I am so sorry to be late. I think this was a daylight savings occurring at different times in different countries problem. So my apologies. Shar, is there a specific question you want me to address, or just overview of network and challenges we're facing?
Overview of network and challenges, really. I mean, the session focuses on how networks can be used to find innovative solutions to local challenges. And I know with the Prevention Practitioners Network, even just creating that infrastructure and connecting practitioners who often do work in silos is a huge step in the right direction. So a little bit about your experience with that. And I guess any recommendations you have for any audience members who are looking to do something similar.
Absolutely. So we started building the Prevention Practitioners Network in the United States roughly a year and a half ago now. And we started with the idea that I kept, as Shar just mentioned, I kept running into different practitioners across the country who would want to accept law enforcement referrals and would ask me, we want to be the first organization to accept referrals from your federal law enforcement or national law enforcement, sorry, for an international context. And, can you help us do that? And I would tell them, absolutely, but you're the fifth organization to do this, and let me introduce you to the other 5. And what I found as I was serving on the boards of various different prevention organizations across the country, they were facing so many common challenges, whether it came to information sharing across multidisciplinary teams, whether it came to the role of formers or ethical challenges, and how do you find a common ground for ethics across interdisciplinary teams where there are different codes of ethics. A lot of very common challenges across all of these organizations. And so we established this network for interdisciplinary professionals. And one of the biggest challenges we faced in starting a network to address these local needs was, frankly, I had organizations coming to me saying, we need you to become an accrediting body, or we want to certify individuals. And so it's important to be realistic and be very sequential in your build. Even just creating a directory of providers willing to accept these referrals in the United States has been, it really helps introduce providers to one another. It helps spur collaboration. We're seeing a lot more collaboration across grant applications, for example, and organizations asking to be connected with other organizations after our events. But even that process of creating a directory has taken about 6 months longer than I anticipated because of all of the legal consultations along the way and all of the ethical implications of what does it mean to have a directory, and then how do you decide on removal? How do you decide kind of parameters for inclusion and parameters for exclusion if someone violates the common code of ethics for the group? And as the last 2 panelists were speaking, you'll notice, as I said, the last year and a half, we have solely existed in a COVID context. And so as we look to move our workshops from online to in person, we're genuinely hoping that we see more collaboration and trust built over time among providers, because those conversations in hallways and those conversations at dinner after a conference can allow for a much greater depth of relationship building. And so we've done as much as we can creating that space to foster collaboration online. And we're looking forward to creating that space in person beginning this July.
Great, thank you so much. Touched on some very important points, including some practical elements that we haven't really discussed yet around being very clear about the mandate of a network when you put it together, criteria for inclusion and exclusion, as you put it, having a code of ethics, and some of the related challenges with that, especially when you develop a national network. How do you make it applicable to it being nationwide, but also specific, obviously, to different fields of work, different contexts, et cetera. So, it was a very good insight into some of the more practical challenges that come with an initiative like this. I'm going to just pose one or two questions, and then I'll pass on to the next panel. So just very quickly for you, Brett. One of the things that I really like about the Prevention Practitioners Network, and there's a lot that I really like, but what I think is very important is that it's not just creating this directory and connecting practitioners together, but it's also delivering workshops to build the capacity of network members. And that's, beyond that core network function, that kind of provision of support is obviously very important. Do you have any recommendations or tips or lessons learned from that experience?
Yeah, Shar knows this better than anyone. We've played with a lot of different formats in order to present information, especially in a virtual context, in a way that will work best for our audience. At first, we structured a workshop so it was research and theory first, and then practice second. We found that there were fewer questions for the researchers than there were for the practitioners, and so we started leaning a little bit more towards the practice side. We also recognize that we have so much to learn from everyone on this call. We have so much to learn from international practitioners. And so for the most part, every workshop or symposium that we've hosted, we've been sure to include international voices, organizations that may be several years ahead of organizations in the United States in terms of implementation and have lessons to share. Just last week, we had the Canadian Practitioners Network share their national research, their national mapping of challenges in multi-sectoral collaboration. Then we had a US-based practitioner responding as to where were their shared challenges, just as this conference is doing today. And so those are some of the lessons we learned along the way. Structure really matters. We were finding we started trying to do breakout rooms because we had so many people participating, which is a good problem to have. And then we would find we would have 60 or 30% drop off at least when we went into breakout rooms. Whereas if we allowed everyone to join a more facilitated conversation, we would actually only lose about 10 people out of 120. So that was eye-opening for us, that even when we were thinking, okay, let's split up by discipline so that psychologists can share with one another the challenges they're having on multidisciplinary teams, the feedback we got was, no, the psychologists really want to hear what the social workers have to say and vice versa. And that's a good thing. It's really good that we are fostering that interdisciplinary learning. But we've probably played with at least 5 different formats at this point. And what seems to work best for us is really allowing that time for conversation, recognizing the expertise of everyone who joins, not just the speakers you select, and allowing for sequential breakouts, and rather than holding them all simultaneously, because the feedback we've gotten is that everyone wants to hear everything rather than having to choose.
Oh, yeah, it's a good problem to have, I suppose, where everyone is so passionate and wants to hear from everyone else. And then my last question, just very quickly, is around network governance or network leadership. So especially with a network, the scope of the Prevention Practitioners Network, right, it's US wide and covers a lot of different professional backgrounds in terms of its membership. Do you have any lessons learned from how to make sure the kind of strategy of the network and stuff is also informed by the different disciplines that are represented, the different states that are represented. Obviously, there's the added complication in the states, as you've said before, of all the legal challenges. So any lessons learned very quickly on that, and then I'll pass to the third.
Yeah, when we initially set up our governance structure, I wanted to make sure that I had someone on our advisory board from the major disciplines represented on multidisciplinary teams, and that I had geographic representation from the major regions across the country. As we've further built out that infrastructure for the network, we now have 5 committees where for ethics, for membership, for different topics like that, we're trying to make it as democratic as possible. The funny lesson learned for me, which is a word of caution for everyone here, is I genuinely wanted to create this network and serve as its staff, serve as its support. And I have a team of 5 that serves as its staff. And I wanted one of the direct services providers to serve as its chair, to serve as leadership. And Shar was on the call where I said, okay, who wants to step up and lead? And it was a game of not it, where every single advisory board member said, but you're doing such a great job and we don't have the bandwidth to lead this. We want you to keep leading it. And that's something we'll have to struggle with over time. Is I want this network to continue to grow in its democratic functions. And part of that is building the capacity of network members to take on those leadership roles.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you so much, Brett. I really appreciate you sharing some of your learnings with this experience. Very insightful. And I know that it's not easy to launch a network, especially in the COVID era, as we've put it. But I know that you've done a fabulous job, and it's been really good to hear you able to share some of those insights in today's webinar. And thank you again to Ingrid and to Jeppe for your intervention earlier. I'm now going to pass back to Dan Hooten, who will be moderating our next and final panel. Dan, over to you.
Thanks so much, Charlotte, and thanks to Brett, to Ingrid, and to Jeppe for another fascinating conversation. And I think it's very important that we're talking about some of the nuts and bolts of making networks work. We're talking about governance and leadership mechanisms. We spend a lot of time talking about some of the thematic substance that we work on, and that's all very important and really, really super relevant. But we don't spend much time talking about how cooperation works and the nuts and bolts of making it effective. It's so important to Nordic Safe Cities and to Strong Cities Network, and it's really one of the key learnings that we take now from what is nearly sort of 7 years of working around the world with a number of different cities. The final session today is going to take the conversation forward. Again, we're going to look at the Global South, and we're going to look at perspectives from Kenya and also from Montenegro. And we're going to take the session forward in talking really about specifically civil society partnerships and networks. And we've got some fascinating perspectives and some great speakers. So we'll have Rahima Zaid Abouyi joining us, and also Angelia Lucic, and I'm really pleased that both of them are able to share some of their learnings and thoughts with us on this session. So again, the format, I'll go to Rahima, to you first. We'll hear a little bit about your work in Kenya, and then Angelia will come back to you, and then we'll have a bit more of a discussion, because I think some really, really important points. Feel free, please, to build on any of the discussion in the past 2 sessions in your presentations, but obviously give us a little bit of background around the work of both of your projects and networks. So Rahima Zaid Abouyi is a researcher, and she's program manager at the Integrated Initiatives for Community Empowerment, and that's an organization in Kenya. Rahima, the floor is yours. Thank you. Rahima, if you could just make sure you're unmuted and we can all hear you loud and clear. Perfect. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's a great honor to be here. And to our Muslim brothers and sisters, Ramadan Mubarak. I'm going to address this question by tackling 3 questions. First of all, the first question is, how can cities enhance local resilience and social cohesion through civil society? And from my 10 years experience working on PVE, it is very important, and this has been like a calling in Kenya, considering that we are taking advantage, we have the national strategy in place. We are also advantage that we have the county action plans with different pillars. So adopting a whole society approach to address the drivers of VE is very important, whereby no one will be left behind. And I've always been recommending a scenario whereby the CSOs will not be just taking funding from the donors because they need funding, but we reach a level whereby we are taking funding from the donors because of our needs. This means that by working collectively and feeling that the CSOs and everyone is at the decision-making table, donors need to engage the CSOs from the inception, from the time when they're designing programs. Sometimes you find a scenario whereby a program that is implemented in one county is the same program that is implemented in another county without considering the different needs. So the designing of the program has to be contextual based on the deep root causes of VE in that county. So I will really emphasize that no one size fits all when it comes to programming, and CSOs need to feel that they're part and parcel of the process and not just having hijacked or having programs imposed on them. And by this, it's by also comparing the different models, which the most suitable model to apply at a certain point. For example, is it the bottom up that is most convenient at a certain time, or is it the top bottom? And also we'll also look at the preventive triangle so as to avoid conflict within the different stakeholders and to avoid challenges like highlighted by CSOs, for example, the shrinking space of CSOs. So it is important for the different CSOs to understand the preventive triangle. Where are they supposed to be? Are they supposed to be here, the government here, and other stakeholders? So it's very important for the CSOs to understand their mandate, and also to leverage on existing programs, because by the virtue that these CSOs have started a program in a certain area, it means that there is a problem, they have identified a need. So it is important, if we are able to work collectively, we will have that space, safe space, where we can be able to engage in difficult conversation, as mentioned by the previous speakers. So some of the keywords is having safe spaces where we can give each other honest feedback about programming. For instance, this time I've said about taking advantage of the pre-existing programs that are in place, which maybe have been initiated by our youth who might not be very knowledgeable, but I always say that they are experts in their own field. The fact that they're on the ground and they've been able to identify the problems in their community. So it's very important that we listen to their voices and we be able to tailor early warning systems, stroke responses. For instance, now in Kenya, we are at a period where we are closely approaching the elections, and there is a lot of hate speech. Researchers have also proven that there is a correlation between the electioneer period in Kenya and the high rise of radicalization. And then next we come to the issues of trust. We need to develop effective communication among different stakeholders, do no harm approach, no stigmatization, having transparency in our communication. And then recently I benefited from a course on place-based leadership, which emphasizes on intersectoral urban violence. And some of the key takeaways from this course is that no one agency has information or expertise and resources to tackle all problems, understanding of other perspectives. We should have common purposes, common objectives. And I'm told that I have 1 minute to end my presentation. It is also important to look back at the pandemic and the unique challenges that have been presented as a result of the pandemic and how we can strengthen multi-sectoral collaboration. My parting shot will be, we should be able to come up with more comprehensive whole society effort to address the drivers of VE, understanding different perspectives.
Rahima, can you still hear us? I think we can take it that Rahima is obviously having some bandwidth issues, but I know she was just drawing her presentation to a close. Hopefully she's able to rejoin us in a moment. I can see her popping up on the screen, and we can come back to some questions on that. Rahima, we just nearly caught the end of your presentation. What I'm going to do, if it's all right with you, I'm going to move on to our next panelist, and then we'll come back and draw on some of the last points you were making in your presentation during the question discussion. So Rahima, thank you so much for sharing some of that insight with us now. We're going to come back, as I say, to a lot of themes that you've raised, and thank you very much for drawing on many of the themes that were already breached in some of the previous sessions. So without further ado, let's move on to our next panelist, Angelija Lucic. I'm very grateful for you joining us, and I've worked with some of your colleagues over the years at Forum MNE, and you know, it's been a pleasure to work with you with Strong Cities Network. I know a little bit about your work, but I think it's important to give some context to those that are following the session today. And it would be great to hear a little bit about the background of Forum MNE and the work you're doing, and some of the ways in which you're tackling some of the strategic issues that we've raised during this session, in particular around networks that can engage effectively civil society organizations on a really sensitive topic area, and how they can build out a role for civil society organizations, including with cities. So I'll leave you with that, and the floor is yours, Angelija.
Thank you, Daniel. It is really, hello everyone, and it is really my great honor to speak today and to address you on behalf of Forum MNE. We are based in Montenegro, and we mostly focus and work on youth issues alongside with PCV. And currently we are organizing and training. So I'm saying hello to you from Budva for 125 young people from the Western Balkan region. So they will arrive tonight, and we are a bit hectic preparing everything to be ready. It is really not easy to speak now at the third panel after so many good experiences and practices heard. I will try to build my presentation on some of the previous topics that were mentioned, and also to try to give some of the context of the project that we conducted in the Western Balkan region. Forum MNE led consortium of 6 CSOs who were implementing multi-year program focused on building community resilience to violent extremism in the Western Balkans. Our program, Communities First, creation of a civil society hub to address issue of violent extremism from prevention to reintegration, big title, but yeah, was launched with the aim to support and empower CSOs to actively engage in PCV policies in the region. And the program was funded by the EU and co-funded by the local donors and ministries. So during more than 3 years, 3.5 years of program implementation, we really managed to reach and build capacities of a huge number of CSOs and local PCV experts. What is also important is that we managed to sensitize governments on the important role that CSOs have in PCV. So how we did this and why we consider this as a success. So some of the methods that we used is actually at the very beginning, we started with the mapping. So at the moment when we started the project implementation, we needed to see, and it was important for us to see and check this, the situation in local communities and situation on the ground, and to see and identify all those local actors that are included or are willing to be included in PCV efforts and activities. Following that, what we did is a really extensive capacity building program. So we had an approach, although the number of trainings and participants was limited, but we had an approach that everyone who wants to be part of our training and everyone who expressed interest to be included in the trainings and education, we will allow it. So we had in total 44 trainings across the Western Balkan region with more than 1,000 local actors and practitioners participated in the trainings. What was maybe specific is actually that although the project was regional and we had unified approach, but at the same time, we were keeping and designing activities to be country specific. So in each activity, we had this regional component, but also we gave space for everything to be country specific and tailored to concrete needs of a country participating in the project. So alongside with capacity building, what we did is networking. So we were organizing experts multi-sector workshops, supported at the same time local activities through small grants program. What is more important, which, because I have a very little time left, is actually that we were partnering with the governments in each of the country. The Forum MNE was included in the national operational team, the government body established to design and propose national CV strategy and to follow its implementation. This is, I'm finishing, I just want to say that this was really important for us because it opened us door to local municipalities which were following the same approach, including local CSOs in development of the policies. I'm here for all the questions because I can speak about this program for hours, so don't worry.
Angelia, thank you so much and for giving us a bit of a flavor of the work that Forum MNE are doing across the region, and like you say, both regionally and country specific. And I think some of the lessons that you raised are really, really worthwhile. And thanks so much for joining us while you're on the eve of your big event in Budva. And I miss working in Budva. We had a great session there a couple of years ago with a number of mayors across just before the COVID season across the region. And it was a really good opportunity to see how alive and well some of the networks, including yours, are across the region. And we look forward to expanding that cooperation. I want to start with where you actually just left us off, Angelia, which was around cooperation and collaboration with government. And let me build on that a little bit. I want to investigate how civil society organizations can be effective partners in preventing and countering violent extremism, including with national and local governments, and how adequate the existing mechanisms for that collaboration are, the formal mechanisms. Because I get the sense that a lot of the benefit that both of your networks bring is also about the informal and outside of these government frameworks. But let's focus on those government frameworks at the beginning. So in particular, how you mentioned the national operational team, and the process that across the Western Balkans countries have gone through to develop national action plans, and some of the municipalities have developed local action plans in line with those national action plans. How adequate are those provisions for the involvement of civil society organizations? Let's focus first on the Balkans, and I'll come to you, Angelia, and then I've got the same question really, Rahima, for you, in particular with reference to things like the community engagement forums that exist at a county level across Kenyan counties. But first of all, Angelia, do you want to respond?
Yes, sure. Thank you for the question. It is really important. So I mentioned previously that our project, although it had regional approach, it was designed to be country specific. So although we did simultaneously all the activities throughout the Western Balkan region, not in all countries partnering with governments went easy. And not in all countries it was achieved. In that sense, maybe the Montenegro is the example of good practice because of the inclusion of Forum MNE in the, let's say, in the official or in the governmental structure for PCV. So besides national operational team, what I would like to mention is actually inclusion of one of my colleagues, Elvira, who was supposed to speak, but unfortunately she's traveling, is actually that in Montenegro, CSOs are included in team for assistance and support, first aid team, who is supposed to address all the threats of potential violent extremism cases. And there the government saw the role that CSOs have is in actually going and preparing the community for example, for an intervention or doing a very intervention. In the sense, I do know that when there was announced that we will have a number of returnees, women and children from Syria and Iraq, then actually the team was discussing that CSOs can, alongside with the local government structures, prepare the community for the returnees to work with schools, centers for social work and etc. So I think that that's really an example of good practice, how the CSOs can be involved. Also, joint work and participation in national operational team was really valuable in terms that the government built their trust in CSOs, and at the same time, CSOs regained their trust in the government. We were enabled to put intervention or to comment on some of the activities, even in the planning phase, which was really important. And also in Montenegro, what we had through a small grants program is actually applying all of the methods that we used on a local level. So on a local level, multi-sector working group was formed and led by a CSO who delivered the first local PCV action plan in Montenegro. Unfortunately, due to political turmoil and the change of the government, it was not yet officially adopted, but we do really hope that that will happen.
Angelia, thanks. I think there's some helpful examples of the ways in which CSOs have been able to play a very constructive role in Montenegro and across the region. Rahima, the same question really. In what way are the official frameworks of governments and local governments? So in the Kenyan context, let's talk maybe about the National Action Plan for Countering Violent Extremism and the county level action plans that exist in a number of different Kenyan counties, as well as the multi-actor coordination mechanisms for implementing those plans, such as community engagement forums. How adequate are those formal frameworks for involving civil society stakeholders in the processes of prevention, and what really are their roles within those frameworks.
Yeah, lucky that have first guides, I mean, program and
Rahima, I'm so sorry. I think that the bandwidth is causing us a little.
You cannot hear me.
I think the bandwidth is causing us a little problems in hearing you. But hopefully you're able to get that sorted.
Let me.
I don't know if you can still hear us.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you well. Yes. Are you able to just respond to that last question then around the adequacy of the existing formal mechanisms for coordination with civil society organizations?
Yeah, actually, I was saying in Kenya, we are lucky that we have the National Counterterrorism with different counties in implementation of the county action plans. We also have, we have reached a level whereby different CSOs are able to work together. And for instance, my organization, Integrated Initiatives to Empowerment, sometimes I go out and support and work very closely with other organizations, for example, Midrift Hurinet in Nakuru. And it is more of complementing each other and sharing our expertise depending on the different needs, and also depending on what are you good in. Are you good in, for instance, on maybe when you look at the pillars of the county action plans, are you good on mental health, or are you good in whichever pillar, maybe on the pillar on gender? So I would say one of the key takeaways, one of the key strengths is that able to complement each other in our efforts. Thank you.
Rahima, thank you, and thank you for persisting despite the bandwidth challenges, and it's been really good to have your perspectives. I'm afraid that we're really short on time, and I think we have to leave that session there. But Angelia, Rahima, thank you so much for your important contributions, and wishing you all the best for your activities in Budva and for your continued work in Kenya, Rahima. So thank you both for joining us. It's time for us to wrap up this session, and I want to thank everybody for joining us. It's been a really, really important opportunity, I think, to zoom out of some of the topical issues that we tend to focus on. And while those conversations continue in many important forums, not least some of the working groups that the Strong Cities Network will soon be launching, it's really important to have time to reflect on the nuts and bolts of cooperation as a network. We've been doing a lot of this work over the past year as we, I think, work on some of the evaluations and lessons that we've learned over the past 6 or 7 years of working with more than 150 cities. I know that our friends at Nordic Safe Cities have been doing a lot of this as well, and making sure that networks stay relevant and purposeful to the stakeholders that they serve. So it's been really good today to have the opportunity to discuss through several different global perspectives how networks have generated impact, how they have gained legitimacy and made a difference, how they've partnered and managed very, very different mandates from those partners that are involved with the networks, and really what the lessons are that we can take forward that are transferable for how cities, civil society organizations, frontline practitioners can work together effectively through networks to collaborate with one another and ultimately deliver effective prevention and cohesion programming. So it's been a really, really great conversation, and I know that we'll have a summary of this that we're able to disseminate. Just in closing, I want to thank everybody for joining us, for all of our speakers, for taking the time out of their very busy days to provide some really, really important perspectives. I want to thank our partners at Nordic Safe Cities Jeppe and his team have been fantastic partners for the Strong Cities Network for a number of years, and we look forward to expanding and deepening our collaboration. It's always more effective when we work together, and their partners in the Nordic region are absolutely critical to the global conversations and not just to those within the region. So we look forward to expanding that partnership, including, I should say, in an upcoming session we have in Helsinki at the end of this month, where we will be bringing together Nordic partners with US counterparts and mayors. That'll be a really, really important session, building on some of the discussion that we focused on in the previous webinar, in particular on safeguarding local democracies. And of course, we'll have the opportunity, not just at the end of this month, but to meet again later in September at the UN General Assembly, where we will have a number of Strong Cities Network events. So we look forward to working together in that. And that just leaves me to say thank you very much to all of the team behind today. And thank you all for joining. Wish you a very, very pleasant rest of your day. And please do be in touch. Thank you.